Manor. Manor Post delivers exclusives to your email inbox every Saturday morning. One post per week could include important news updates, the latest developments on productions, exclusive discounts, previews of upcoming releases, and so much more. Plus, every single post will come with the Macabre Menu, a schedule of Manor Entertainment's programming for the upcoming week. Go to manorhq.com and fill out the subscription form on the homepage. Join the rapid growing list of subscribers by adding your name at manorhq.com.
Follow Manor online and on social media. You can find Manor on Twitter at Official Manor, on Instagram at Manor Entertainment, on YouTube at Manor Entertainment, and on the official website address, manorhq.com. As always, share with others and spread the word.
Warning. The following program may contain violence, explicit language, sexual situations, and dark content, unsuitable for some listeners. It is intended for mature audiences only. Discretion is advised.
Presented in cinematic audio.
Interrupt. I-N-T-E-R-R-U-P-T. Interrupt.
Hazard. H-A-Z-Z-A-R-D. Hazard.
Appellate. A-P-P-E-L-L-A-T-E. Appellate.
Aberrant.
Aberrant. A-B-E-R-A-N-T.
I'm sorry, that is incorrect. As soon as the letters left her lips, she knew her mistake. In her head, she heard her mother's voice.
2 R's, Emily. How long did we spend going over that?
Lock-kneed, Emily shuffled away from the microphone. Instead of heading back to her chair like in rehearsal, however, she continued walking all the way off the stage and past the concerned adults standing in the wings. She knew she looked like a sore loser, but at that moment, she didn't care. She couldn't stand there amidst the applause while somewhere past the spotlights, her mother frowned at her. 2 more words, and it was over. She had won 3rd place. It should have been 1st. 3rd place didn't get a trophy. More importantly, 3rd place didn't get any prize money. She stood, watching from the wings, as Cooper posed for pictures with his 1st place trophy. Though she guessed they were sort of friends, it bothered her that lately he was winning the awards she knew she should be winning. He'd always been a goof-off. When had he gotten so smart? A hand landed on her arm, making her jump.
Your mother is waiting for you, honey.
Mrs. Gardiner, her sixth-grade teacher, said. The woman smiled and squeezed her shoulder.
Great job.
Unable to stall any longer, Emily emerged from backstage and into the auditorium. Her eyes roved the lingering crowd of spelling bee participants and their relatives. They finally came to rest on her mother, who stood talking to Cooper's mother. She gave a small sigh of relief. Her mother wouldn't make a scene in front of other people. Mrs. Gordon was in mid-sentence when Emily approached.
Can't get it by prescription since it's not FDA approved. But it doesn't just help kids focus. It also helps with brain function and retention. If you can believe it, June Lee, 2 weeks ago, Cooper was having trouble concentrating enough to read. Now he's reading at college level. The only thing is that you can't miss a dose. His new doctor was adamant about that, what with the withdrawal symptoms.
June Lee nodded and tucked something into her jacket pocket as Emily walked up. She looked down at her daughter with a small frown, then back to Cooper's mother.
Thank you. Well, we should be going. Tell your husband hello, and again, congratulations.
I'm sorry,
Emily breathed as her mother led her down the aisle toward the auditorium lobby.
I know you are. We could have used that money.
Emily opened her mouth to come up with an excuse, an explanation, a promise to do better next time, but she was all out of those words, and she feared, having been used too often, they had lost their effectiveness. They drove home in silence. Dinner that evening was green mung bean soup. Emily swirled her spoon in the bowl, watching the heat rise off it in lazy curls. Had her mother expected her to lose the spelling bee and prepared this ahead of time as punishment?
Stop playing with your food and eat. Here, take this.
June Lee dropped a large blue tablet into Emily's hand and sat down across from her at the dinner table.
What is it?
It's a vitamin. Take it.
What kind of vitamin?
The kind I'm telling you to take.
Again, Emily hesitated, then took a sip of water and swallowed the pill, almost gagging on it. The fact that her mother wasn't yelling scared her more than the yelling usually did.
I'm sorry.
I don't want to talk about it anymore. I can talk until I'm blue in the face about how you need to concentrate on your studies and work hard to be the best at everything you do so you can go to a good college, because I don't have the money to send you. But I'm just wasting my breath, aren't I? Well, I'm done talking. Finish your dinner, brush your teeth, and go to your room to practice.
Emily kept her eyes rigidly focused on her bowl as she choked down her soup. When she was done, she brushed her teeth, then went upstairs to her bedroom and picked up her violin. She spent 10 minutes staring at it, memorizing the grain of the wood, the feel of the bow in her hand. June Lee had always been disappointed that Gong Gong and Po-Po had been too poor to afford violin lessons when she was Emily's age. So she was determined that Emily would become a virtuoso in her stead.
I'm not hearing you.
Emily scowled and picked up the violin by the neck with both hands, hefting it over her head. But her fantasies of smashing it against a wall were just that, fantasies. She wanted to turn on the radio and lose herself in music more to her taste, but with a sigh, she lifted the violin to her chin turned the pages of her sheet music to Mozart's Concerto No. 4 and began the play. After a few minutes, she stopped, shocked. She had never played so well. She started again, and after 5 minutes, stopped reading the music, playing by memory alone. After months of practice, her fingers had finally learned what she needed them to do. She laughed as her bow sped across the strings, and the music bled out of her as easily as if she had opened a vein. "20 minutes later, she put up her bow and turned around to hear a strange sound. Her mother stood in the doorway of her room, quietly weeping. The crying alarmed her.
Mom?
Perfect.
She walked into the room and flipped the sheet music to Paganini's Caprice No. 24.
Now play this.
Emily bit her lip, but nodded. She had never played the Paganini piece before, but she had never heard her mother say she was perfect before either. She wanted to hear her say it again. Emily picked up her bow and began the play. When she was done, sweat stood out on her brow, but she was grinning from ear to ear. She knew she hadn't made any mistakes. Her mother knew it too. June Lee laughed, a sound Emily hadn't heard since her father had left 3 years ago, and gave her daughter a crushing hug.
Perfect. That's exactly what I expect from you. You can't afford to be less than perfect. Now do it just like that for the recital on Thursday.
Emily closed her eyes, swallowing hard against a sudden wave of nausea. She felt hot.
I think I'm going to go to bed.
You have a math exam tomorrow. I want you to spend the next hour studying. Then you can go to bed.
She swept aside her daughter's bangs and planted a kiss on her forehead. The last thing she wanted to do was study, especially math. But Emily nodded, not wanting to ruin the moment.
Perfect.
Her mother had said she was perfect. The next morning, another blue pill was waiting for her on the table next to her bowl of cereal. She rolled it between her index finger and thumb, bringing it close to her eyes to examine it.
Vitamins are meant to be taken, not prodded.
Emily frowned, but gulped the pill down with half her glass of orange juice. She pecked at her cereal, disguising how little she was eating by moving it around the bowl and clinking her spoon. Her stomach was a little upset, which she ascribed to nerves. Even with her performance last night, she was reluctant to entirely trust in the power of the pill. What if it didn't work for math test? What if she was back to ordinary, disappointing Emily?
You'll be perfect,
her mother reassured her with an uncharacteristic hug, ushering her out the door. She was right. Mrs. Gardner looked surprised when she turned her paper in. Despite her usually average grades, Emily found the test extremely easy and was the first one done. For the first time, the patterns and formulas made sense to her, and she couldn't understand why she had so many problems with them before.
Are you sure you don't want to check your answers one last time?
Emily shook her head, a mass of relief and slow booming self-satisfaction.
May I have a hall pass? I need to go to the bathroom.
Her stomach made a loud gurgling sound that made her blush to the roots of her hair and the nearest kids giggle. After getting the pass, she hurried as fast as she could to the restroom, careful not to actually run. Even still, she almost didn't make it to the toilet before retching up a thick stream of dark vomit. It tasted like a mixture of bile, mung bean soup, and something oily. She frowned. Was there something blue floating in the mess? She didn't have much time to consider it as she heard someone else enter the bathroom. Quickly, she waved her arms to disperse the sour odor hanging in the air and flushed the toilet. When she emerged from the stall, the other girl stared at her, nostrils quivering at the smell.
Gross! What did you eat?
Emily just averted her eyes, washed up, and hurried back to class. Recess was after the math test. All the 6th grade classes had recess at the same time. She took her usual seat on the air conditioner next to the building, but instead of pulling out a book to read, she sat and waited, drumming her heels, metronome-like, against the metal as she practiced her congratulations for Cooper's spelling bee win.
"Hey, teacher's pet!"
Jeffrey Caputo called as he came out of the building and saw her. The class bully smirked as she unconsciously hunched her shoulders in a vain attempt to shrink into the air conditioner. He opened his mouth to continue with his usual taunts, but thankfully one of his friends distracted him before he could really start in on her. Emily let out a sigh of relief. Finally, Cooper came running, his shock of red hair like a meteor hurtling out of the schoolyard door.
Cooper! Hey! I didn't get a chance to say so yesterday, but good job at the spelling bee.
He nodded and bent down to pluck at the weeds sprouting from around the air conditioning unit.
Thanks. Your mom's making you take the same vitamins mine is, huh? Have you been feeling sick?
I threw up earlier, but now I'm okay.
She thought back to the weird black vomit and what she thought she'd seen in it, but shook her head.
Last night I played the violin so well, my mom cried. And I know I aced my math test, and I suck at math. Where'd your mom get those pills? What are they?
My doctor gets them off the internet, I think. I don't care. I hate them wherever they came from. It was cool at first to be so smart, but now nothing tastes good anymore, and I've been throwing up once a day. All the teachers have been smiling weird at me too, and now they're talking about putting me in a special gifted school. My mom watches me all the time to make sure I take them, but I didn't take my pill this morning.
I heard your mom say you can't miss a dose. There's a withdrawal.
So, I've taken loads of pills with all sorts of side effects. I'm not scared.
But if you stop taking it, you'll go back to before?
Being dumb? I don't care. I'd rather be me than some zombie.
Cooper, you coming?
I'm coming! Talk to you later.
The smell as she walked in the front door made Emily's mouth water. Her mother must be in a very good mood to fix American food rather than something traditionally Chinese for dinner.
We're having chicken nuggets, your favorite.
Emily sat down at the table, and there it was, the large blue tablet on the napkin next to her plate. She stared at it. Was Cooper right? Was taking the pill making her a zombie? Was it wrong to be a zombie, if her mother loved her that way?
How was school?
June Lee asked, but Emily could read between the lines. Her mother really wanted to know how Emily's math test had gone. She couldn't keep the grin off of her face.
It hasn't been graded yet, but I know I made 100%.
That's my girl.
She scooped a generous helping of the chicken nuggets onto Emily's plate and set it down in front of her.
I have a surprise for you. I've entered you into the Young Inventors Contest.
The Young Inventors Contest?
It's a national science fair. First place earns $5,000, and I know it'll be no trouble for you to win. That's $5,000 towards your college fund. I know there are a few other contests you would be good for, too, and I'll look into those. Now, take your vitamin.
Under the table, Emily dug the nails of one hand into her palm, using the slash of pain as a goad to action. She stared fixedly at her plate. June Lee took a sip of tea from the mug in front of her and shuffled through the mail.
Mom? I don't really want to enter the contest.
We all have to do things we don't want to do. Now, don't we?
Her mother's voice was light, but beneath it was the familiar steel that brooked no argument. Emily scowled, dropping her chin to her chest so that her hair covered the emotion. It didn't matter how well she did. Her mother would always expect more. Only when she'd successfully smoothed over her features again did she look up. She picked up her glass. In slow motion, she took a sip, then lifted the pill to her lips. Before she could think better of it, she deposited it in her cheek, holding it there with her tongue while she swallowed the liquid. June Lee pushed back her chair and stood to throw the junk mail in the trash. As soon as she turned around, Emily spat the pill out and secreted it away in the front pocket of her jumper. Her hands shook as she picked up a nugget. This tiny act of rebellion alarmed and exhilarated her. She couldn't wait to tell Cooper about it tomorrow at recess. She reflected with a frown that he was right. Dinner didn't seem to taste quite as good as she remembered, and she wasn't very hungry anyway.
Is everything all right?
June Lee asked when she returned to the table, noting Emily's lack of appetite. Emily smiled and popped another chicken nugget in her mouth, methodically chewing.
I'm fine. Thank you for dinner, Mom.
You're welcome. After dinner, wash up and go practice. Your recital is tomorrow evening and you have to be ready.
Emily choked down the rest of her dinner, then obediently headed upstairs while her mother did the dishes. Once safely ensconced in her room with the door shut, she took the pill out of her jumper pocket, still wet and sticky from its time in her mouth, and let out a breath. A slow smile spread across her face at her success. Again, she examined the pill, noting its deep blue color and oblong shape. Unlike most of the other vitamins her mother had made her take in the past, this one had no brand name stamped into its surface, but it otherwise looked much like any other vitamin. After a moment, she walked over to the trash can, but before she threw it in, she hesitated. What if the withdrawal symptoms Cooper's mother talked about were really bad?
I'm not hearing you.
Emily bit her lip, then opened her dresser and nestled the pill under her socks. If the symptoms were bad, she wanted the option to take the pill again to stave them off. It wasn't cowardice, she told herself, just good sense. Closing the drawer, she picked up her violin and began to play. The next morning, Emily again pocketed her pill rather than taking it. It was easier for her this time. She even felt a certain thrill of self-destructive anticipation at the idea of getting caught. On the pretense of having forgotten a textbook, she ran back to her room to tuck the pill into her dresser next to the previous one. She froze, her stomach twisting. The pill was broken open, like an eggshell. It sat hollow in the bottom of the drawer.
What?
She poked at the shards.
Emily, hurry! You're going to be late for the bus.
Coming!
With no time to investigate further, Emily placed the new pill next to the remains of the old one and covered them both hastily with her socks. Then she shoved the dresser drawer closed and flew out of her room.
Is something wrong?
Emily could only shake her head. Her knees felt weak, and her heart was pounding in her ears from more than just running down the stairs. What were those vitamins, really? They looked like pills, but pills didn't hatch. A cold flash arched down her spine at that thought. What had hatched out, and where had it gone?
It's rude not to answer when someone's talking to you.
She looked up to see her mother staring at her. For a moment, Emily thought about telling her everything. Then she imagined how angry her mother would be if she knew Emily hadn't been taking her vitamins, that without them, she would go back to being ordinary, disappointing Emily, and realized, ruefully, that her newfound confidence was really just false bravado. Her shoulders slumped.
Nothing,
She said, kissing her mother on the cheek and dashing out the door. She needed to talk to Cooper. She needed to know if he could find out anything more about where the pills came from or what they were. That day, Emily barely paid attention in class. She was too anxious for recess so she could talk to Cooper, and every time she thought about the broken pill, it made her shiver. The nausea was gone today, but now her eyes were bothering her. There were black spots floating in her field of vision. Apparently, even Mrs. Gardner noticed she wasn't focused on school. During work time, she pulled Emily aside.
Is everything all right, Emily? You seem very distracted.
Emily nodded, blinking again. It wasn't any brighter than usual in the classroom, but the spots were similar to what happened when you looked at the sun or other light for too long.
Everything's fine, Miss Gardner.
When Emily turned to go back to her desk, however, her teacher stopped her again.
By the way, nice job in the test yesterday. Looks like you finally got the hang of it. Has your mom been tutoring you?
Emily forced a smile in return, aware that the other kids in the class were peering up at her over their scratching pencils, watching and listening.
Uh-huh.
It seemed like an eternity until work time was over and recess came. Emily slid her blank notebook paper into her desk and hurried to line up at the door to the classroom, blinking her eyes to clear them. The black spots wouldn't go away. Was it the withdrawal? Was she going blind?
Stop winking at me,
Jeffrey Caputo demanded, sliding into line behind her. Checking to make sure their teacher wasn't looking, he made as if to accidentally knock into her, only for Emily to smoothly dodge out of his way. Overbalanced, he fell, catching himself with his hands.
Jeffrey, is everything okay?
He tripped,
Emily heard herself answer. She looked Jeffrey in the eye, feeling an unknown but satisfying calmness spread through her, and smiled beatifically.
Right, Joffrey?
The kids around them tittered, and Emily flushed with pleasure at her own daring. Jeffrey himself looked bemused.
That's right, Mrs. Gardner.
He stood.
Weirdo,
he hissed at Emily. A moment later, he left the line and rejoined it further back. Once outside, Emily ran over to the air conditioning unit to wait for Cooper, knuckling her eyes to try and force away the spots. She sat there the entire period, but he never came out the door.
Emily.
She looked up to see Ms. Harris coming over. Cooper's teacher had her silver whistle in hand, ready to blow it to signal the end of recess.
Why are you sitting here all alone? Shouldn't you be playing with the other kids?
Miss Harris, is Cooper okay?
His mother called and said he has the flu. Why, is something wrong?
Emily bit her tongue. She didn't want to say it wasn't the flu, so she shook her head instead. She really needed to talk to Cooper, but if he wouldn't be at school for the next few days, that would be difficult. Her mother had never allowed her to have any friends over or go over to friends' houses except for special occasions, and never on a school night. Then an idea came to her.
I can take him his homework.
That would be very nice of you, Emily, if you're sure your parents are okay with it. Why don't you come by my classroom right after the bell and I'll give you his assignments so he doesn't get too far behind?
My mom won't mind.
Science was the last class of the day, but she spent the time pretending to pay attention while forging Margot's signature on a note, allowing her to take Cooper's bus instead of her own. She had never done anything like that before and felt a momentary surge of fear and doubt. But despite her efforts, the bus driver barely glanced at the product of her labor when she boarded with Cooper's homework in hand. Her success made her almost giddy with relief. When the bus coasted to a stop at the corner of Willow and Crestwood, she hopped out and began scanning the house numbers.
3552, 3554, 3556.
She had only been to Cooper's house once, for his 8th birthday party, but she remembered his father's old Ford Mustang in the driveway and the faded garden flag billowing in the breeze from a pole affixed to the side of the house. With renewed determination, she walked up the driveway to the front door and rang the bell.
Cooper, it's me, Emily. Open the door.
She rang the bell again, then knocked. With her fist upraised to knock again, the door swung open. It wasn't Cooper, though, but his mother. Emily staggered back a step, startled. Cooper was a latchkey kid. His mother should be at work.
Emily?
Mrs. Gordon looked as surprised as Emily felt. Cooper's mother also looked haggard, with puffy eyes and mussed hair, as if she had just stumbled out of bed after crying herself to sleep. Emily thrust the worksheets Miss Harris had given her out toward the woman like a shield.
I brought Cooper's homework. I heard he was sick.
She tried to peer around the woman, but Mrs. Gordon filled the doorway, blocking her view.
That was very thoughtful of you. Thank you.
She smiled wanly. The woman was clearly nervous. Emily frowned, feeling her stomach doing little flip-flops in her belly.
Is Cooper okay? Can I talk to him?
He's sleeping right now, but I'll let him know you stopped by.
Mother?
Mrs. Gordon flinched.
Go back to bed, honey,
she called over her shoulder, moving just enough so that Emily could see Cooper standing at the bottom of the stairs in his pajamas.
Cooper, are you okay?
Emily called, inserting herself into the doorway so that his mother couldn't shut the door. The boy regarded her with eyes that made her shiver. She thought she saw something dark in them besides his pupils. He cocked his head like a bird. His voice was full of longing, as if he savored something delicious.
I'm perfect, thanks for asking. Your fear tastes like sugar. Why are you afraid? Soon, you'll be perfect too. All the dross will melt away and leave you who you were always meant to be.
Emily shuddered and retreated a step out of the doorway and back onto the porch.
What are you talking about? What's wrong with you?
That was very kind of you to bring his homework. Cooper will be back to school in a few days. Thank you.
With that, Mrs. Gordon shut the door in Emily's face. Emily felt lightheaded. Her vision had shrunk to a tunnel directly in front of her. she dropped the worksheets and ran.
Where have you been? The bus came by an hour ago.
June Lee demanded when Emily burst in the front door, having run the entire way home. She was puffing like a bellows, and her blouse was plastered to her thin chest with sweat.
The recital is less than an hour.
The vitamins. They're not vitamins.
What? What are you talking about?
Cooper's a monster. The vitamins made him a monster.
Enough of this nonsense. You're not getting out of this recital. Now go on upstairs and get your violin and sheet music. We have to leave. Now.
A sob caught in Emily's throat. She ran past her mother and up the stairs, with June Lee shouting after her to hurry. Vitamins didn't have shells, and they didn't give you black, oily vomit. Emily yanked open her dresser drawer and flung handfuls of white, knee-high socks behind her in her desperate search. Suddenly, something that had been stuck to one of them came unglued and landed in the bottom of the drawer. It was a slimy, wormy thing, about the length of the first two joints of her little finger and as thin as the laces on her good shoes. It was also still alive. It wriggled over toward the pill she had hidden that morning, only the pill was no longer whole. Another worm was busy pushing its way out of the remains of its shell, struggling to free itself from its prison. As Emily watched in horror, the first worm struck like a snake, invisible teeth in a tiny mouth tearing into its helpless sibling. A thimbleful of black, oily blood gushed from the wound as the victim thrashed in soundless agony. As if struggling to wake from a nightmare, Emily found herself unable to scream.
Soon, you'll be perfect too.
Perfect.
From downstairs, her mother called.
Emily, we need to go. Don't make me come up there.
Emily's eyes widened in terror and pain as something sharp stabbed into her left temple, accompanied by a sensation as if something were squeezing through a tiny hole in her skull. Again, she tried to scream, but she couldn't force it out of her throat. All that came out instead was a hissing moan. After a moment, she let out a sigh as the pain subsided. Her bloodshot and tear-swollen eyes relaxed into sleepy contentment. She giggled as something tickled its way into her brain, then reached up a hand to wipe her nose, leaving a smear of red across her palm. More blood dribbled down from her left nostril and hung, quivering from her upper lip.
Emily, now!
A crooked smile bloomed on Emily's blood-slick lips, and she ran her tongue over them, taking in the iron tang along with a trace of sweetness that even now was fading.
Here I come,
she said as she hefted her violin and headed down the stairs.
You've been listening to Manor House, Episode 19, Life Perfected, presented in cinematic audio. Subscribe to this show and leave a rating, a review, and general feedback wherever you're receiving this program. Share with others on social media and at home. Your feedback, as well as sharing with others, helps grow and continue future productions. Credits. This episode was originally recorded and produced in 2015. Performances by Tisha Boone as Emily, Nicole Doolin as June Lee, Aiko as Cooper Gordon, Rock Capuano as Jeffrey Caputo. Story by Jamie Simo. Directed, produced, edited, and scripted by Rock Capuano. Music, audio, and sound design provided by Edel SFX. Theme song by Alan Postscript, based on The Shining by the Angelas. Cover art by Inspired Insanity. Manor House was created by Rock Capuano. Manor House is a Manor Entertainment production. The story, all names, characters, and incidents portrayed in this production are fictitious. No identification with actual persons, living or deceased, places, buildings, and products is intended or should be inferred. This production is property of Manor Entertainment, LLC. No portion of this production may be reproduced or used by any means without the proper written consent of Manor Entertainment, LLC. This production is protected under the copyright laws of the United States and other countries throughout the world. Country of first publication, United States of America. Any unauthorized exhibition, distribution, or copying of this production, or any part thereof, may result in civil liability and criminal prosecution. Copyright 2019, Manor Entertainment, LLC.